So, in the collection videos, I came to the realization that these guitars, several of them have stories that maybe I didn't tell in deep depth really well. So, I thought I'd take a moment to look a little closer at some of them. And the ones that have stories give a little insight as to where these guitars came from and how they came into existence my from my perspective. This guitar is a 1963 Gibson Dove, and it has been all across the United States, not as a gigging instrument, but because it traveled with my dad when he would go places and do things. And he was not a big traveler, but little things like a nick right here and little wear and tear on the guitar. If you look on this guitar, you'll see, and I may not be able to get it to focus on it, but there is some pretty good fret wear. My dad was a strummer, and so because of that, he did not do a lot of finger picking up here. His was mostly done down here. So the frets on the first, second, and third fret really do have some pretty good wear on them. It has been recrowned at one point in time in the past, and there's really no nibs left from the amount of playing that's been done to the guitar. So I probably could get a refret on a 1963 Dove. I'm leery to do that to the neck, because as of right now, these are the original frets that came on it in 1963, and there's something to be said about these guitars from the 60s and 50s and even as late as the 70s that were made with good wood, and I'll talk about that in a different video. That how does the good woods of the past compare to selected woods of today? But this guitar came into being, and it is one owner basically. I mean, my dad was the only owner. It's never been in anybody else's hands except for his when it came to possession. But this guitar was not purchased, or let me rephrase that. This guitar was not intended to be purchased. It just happened into existence. Sometimes destiny intervenes and something becomes yours when you maybe did or didn't plan on it being the way it was. In 1963, my dad was looking to buy a cherry, not even sunburst, just a cherry colored Gibson EBO bass. And he went into a music store in Beaumont, Texas. And in the guitar shop, they said, "Hey, I'm looking for a Gibson EBO bass." And the guy pointed him into a corner and said, "It's over there underneath. It's two guitars down underneath the acoustic guitar." So when he did go in there and walk over to where the guitar was, this guitar's case was sitting on top of the EBO case. With that in mind, my dad was absolutely curious, so he popped the case open, and in it sat a mint condition 1963 Gibson Dove. And the Dove was still pretty new at this point. I believe the Hummingbird was introduced in 1961, and the Dove was introduced as a 1962 model. So this was a second year guitar for Gibson at the time. Remember, this was almost 60 years ago now. I mean, we're in 2022 at the time of recording. So this guitar itself is almost 60 years old. But at the time, this guitar was a new model in Gibson's lineup. And Dad had never seen it before, but he loved that Dove right there. And so he was curious. He said, "Man, this is a good-looking guitar. You know, does it play well?" He said, "Well, it's a new model, but you know, if you're interested in it, I'll make you a deal you can't refuse on this guitar and your EBO that you want." To which my dad was like, "Well, how much do you want to sell it to me for?" And he sold the EBO and this Dove to my dad for $600, and he told him he'd also give him as many picks as he could fit in his hand out of the jar of picks that he had. And some of those picks are still around. But at the end of the day, this guitar was basically $300. The EBO base was $300. Both of them came with hard shell cases at the time. And this guitar was picked up from that shop. In 1967, my dad was drafted into Vietnam. With that being said, he was convinced he was going to die. The EBO had a fuzz tone switch on it, and so the battery that it took to operate that had gone bad. Battery technology in the 60s was not exactly what it is today. So the EBO was suffering. Dad sold the EBO, but my dad's mom was so enamored with the way this guitar looked, she wouldn't let him sell it. So again, destiny intervened and brought the guitar into a safe place. With that in mind, Dad went to Vietnam, came back, didn't die, and this guitar was waiting for him when he got back. He had picked up another guitar along the way. I think he said it was a Yamaha or something, but while he was in Vietnam, that's what he carried around out there. But this guitar was always waiting for him back home. With that in mind, this guitar has just persevered in the family. And it has had this bridge reattached once. So it did start to come up. And so because it came up, it needed to be reattached. And it was done by a guy named Kevin Perry at a place called Great Southern Music just outside of Houston, Texas. At the time, I think Kevin's shop was in Houston. I think it's actually in Addicts now. It's just outside Houston. So if Great Southern Music is still in business, I might have to look them up and see if Kevin still owns the place, because if he does, there's another guitar in this collection that was ordered from Great Southern Music, and is something that I might be interested in ordering another one of at a later date. But anyway, so at the end of the day, this guitar, which is spruce top, maple back and sides, as I believe it's a mahogany neck. Yeah, I believe so. Looking at the grain on it, I believe this is a mahogany neck. But this guitar has never had a neck break. The number on it is, I think, 63802. I wonder if it says it in here. Oh, yeah, it does. 63802. I wonder if 63 was the year and then 802 was the build number. I don't know, but it's definitely a Kalamazoo guitar because it's got the beautiful orange logo in there, or the sticker in there. But this guitar has persevered and lived through so many different things in its life. And I only hope that my grandchildren will pass it on to their grandchildren, as I sometimes think I will do at some point in time. But this guitar, still today, just plays easy. The neck is really thin compared to what I think like a modern hummingbird has on it. So it's a very 60s reminiscent neck, but it's easy to play. Your hand just feels right, and you can hang a thumb over and, you know, play a D chord with a, you know, F sharp on it. And it has a tone that is every bit what you think a Gibson should sound like. And I definitely love the way this guitar sounds. And I don't play it a whole lot because I don't want to wear the frets out any more than they already kind of are. But when I play it, it always takes me back to my youngest days, because it really is the first guitar I ever touched. So for me, at, you know, almost 50 years old, this guitar means a lot, and it even meant even more to my dad, who took it with him everywhere. But this guitar was never gigged per se. I mean, it was played out and about, but it was never really gigged or toured with. It just went places with us, and so because of that, it's lived in its case most of its life, but it has always had a little extra protection taken for it, and it's always just been loved. So So, anyway, this guitar to this day stays in tune better than any guitar that I have from the modern collections. The tuners are probably Kluson. Interestingly enough, they are like waffle backs with no markings on them. And that is exactly how Gibson put it together. So, possibly Klusons, possibly Gibson clones of a Kluson. I don't really know. I know it's completely stock because it's been this way, looking just like this, since the 70s when I was a boy. And it just feels right, sounds great, and the wear on it, on the sides, if you look at the bottom here, you can see that along here, this is very light where the hand has been strumming on it, but on the top, it has all along right here, you can see where the edges have been rubbed white where the other part has the yellow lacquer across it. So it is definitely worn there. And that's a sign of a guitar that's had a lot of use. But like I say, overall, Gibson loves this guitar. They know about it. I love this guitar. And it holds a lot of special memories for me because of the time I spent with my dad with it. And hopefully my grandchildren will have time that they spend with my daughters. And it gets to continue being a point of inspiration for decades to come. So anyway, 1963 Gibson Dove. And it has survived countless trips, and it has not been sold several times, even though people have offered many times. So there you go. That's the story of the Dove and how it came into the family. Till next time.